Dust rolled across the empty Texas trail like a ghost rising from the earth, stinging Lena Dawson's eyes as she trudged forward. Her boots were torn, her dress ripped, and her arms bruised from the wagon accident that had nearly taken her life 3 nights earlier. She was a schoolteacher with no school, a widow with no home, and a woman with no one left in the world. All she wanted was shelter, just one night of safety. As the sun dipped low, she spotted a sprawling ranch sitting silent against the horizon. A fence, a lone barn, and a house built of weathered timber. Hope flickered inside her until the front gate creaked open. A tall figure stepped out. Rancher Cole Hart. He stood broad-shouldered and still, his hat casting a shadow across eyes that didn't blink. His reputation whispered through nearby towns, a man who kept to himself, a man whose word was law on his land. But nothing about his cold stare prepared Lena for what he said next. "You said you can't have children." His voice cut the air in half. Lena froze mid-step. She hadn't told him that. She hadn't told anyone in months. Still, she managed a small, confused nod. Cole's lips curled into a slow, almost relieved smile. "Good," he murmured. "Then you'll raise mine instead." The wind stopped. The land fell silent. But what kind of man offers his children to a stranger? And what secret was Cole Hart so desperate to keep hidden? Before the accident, before the dust and the hunger and the nights spent trembling under open skies, Lena Dawson had been a woman of quiet hope. She taught children in a one-room schoolhouse, humming little songs as she wrote lessons on the chalkboard. She dreamed of a family of her own, a dream that shattered the day a doctor told her she would never bear children. It became the private heartbreak she buried deepest, something she shared with only one person, her late husband, Thomas. His sudden death, a fever that swept through their wagon camp, left her unanchored. With no family of her own and no child to hold on to, she packed what little she had and joined a small group heading west. But fate had other plans. When the wagon overturned in a river crossing, she was thrown, injured, and left behind as the group scattered. Alone, bruised, terrified, she walked until her feet bled, searching for shelter along the endless Texas frontier. The 1880s were no place for a woman wandering by herself. Bandits, drifters, wolves, drought, all of them deadly. Even good people were hardened by the land, and kindness was a scarce commodity. So when Lena spotted the Hart Ranch rising out of the evening glow, she clung to hope like a lifeline. Yet the closer she came, the heavier the air felt, as if the land itself held its breath. The house looked normal. The barn stood solid. But something about this place wasn't right. She could feel it. Lena stepped inside the ranch house, expecting the warm clutter of family life, boots by the door, laughter, the smell of stew. Instead, she was met with a silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. The place was spotless, almost unnaturally so, as if someone had scrubbed it clean of sound, color, and memory. 2 pairs of eyes watched her from the hallway. A little boy, Emmett, maybe 8 years old, stood half hidden behind the doorframe. He didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just studied her with a seriousness no child should ever carry. Beside him was a small girl, Lucy, 5 at most, holding a fraying doll against her chest. The doll's face was dirty, but Lucy's was pale and completely silent. Not a single word. Not even a whisper. When Cole stepped behind Lena, both children immediately pressed themselves against him, almost trembling. Yet the moment their eyes returned to Lena, something flickered there, a plea? A warning? Or a quiet hope? Cole placed a firm hand on Lena's shoulder. "You'll stay the night," he said. Not asked. Said. Out in the yard, the ranch hands paused to watch them enter the dining room. They weren't curious, they were tense. Their gazes slid over Lena, a mix of pity and fear. Every one of them avoided Cole's eye. Dinner was awkwardly quiet. Lena tried to ask the children simple questions. "Where are you from? Do you like stories?" But Emmett only stared, and Lucy lowered her head, gripping her doll tighter. Then Cole finally spoke. "Their mother died last winter." He didn't look sad. He didn't look anything. They need someone gentle. The words were kind. But the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes held hers. Something in that story wasn't true. Something in this house was terribly wrong. The house had gone still, the way a forest goes quiet when a predator walks through it. Lena couldn't sleep. Cole's strange smile. The ranch hand's nervous eyes. The children's silence. It all rattled in her mind like loose nails in a crate. A soft rustling came from the hallway. She stepped out and froze. Emmett was crouched on the floor, stuffing a few cloves and a half loaf of bread into a tiny burlap sack. His hands shook. When he saw Lena, his face went pale, then determined. "We're leaving," he whispered. "Tonight. Before he takes us into the woods again." Lena's blood ran cold. "What woods?" "Emmett, why would he take you there?" He swallowed hard, looking over his shoulder as if expecting Cole to appear from the darkness. "He says it's chores," the boy murmured. "But he makes us go when it's still dark. And he won't let us talk. Won't let us look around. Last week," his voice cracked. "Last week, Lucy fell. He dragged her up like she was nothing." Lena knelt beside him. "What is he doing out there?" Emmett shook his head. "I don't know. But there's a shed. A locked shed. He says we'll get whipped if we go near it." A soft whimper carried down the hall. Lucy stood there clutching her doll, wide-eyed, trembling. Through tiny gasps she whispered, "The horses scream at night. I hear shovels, too. Dirt moving. Daddy says it's coyotes, but coyotes don't cry like people." Lena felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She pulled the little girl close. Then Lucy lifted her tear-streaked face and delivered the sentence that chilled Lena to the bone. "If he likes you, he'll make you mama. Like he tried with the last one." Lena's heart stopped. The children weren't just scared. They were warning her. And the night was far from over. Later that afternoon, Lena found Eli, one of the older ranch hands, leaning against a fence post, his boots dusty and his expression uneasy. He worked quietly, but tonight his eyes were restless, flicking toward the barn, toward the hilltops, as though his own shadows haunted him. "I want to ask you something," Lena said softly, voice steady. "Something about the children, and Mr. Hart." Eli straightened, jaw tight. He swallowed, then spoke in a low, haunted whisper. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered, Miss Dawson. Sometimes, the truth's a burden heavier than you think." She leaned closer. "Please. I need to understand. Their mother, did she die in the winter, like Mr. Hart says?" Eli hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "You weren't here then. He didn't just die of sickness. That much I'll tell you." His voice dropped. "There was an argument. Something happened. Enough that men quit. Half this ranch left right after." Lena's stomach churned. "What do you mean? What happened?" But Eli shook his head. "It's not my story to tell," he said, voice trembling. "You'll just get hurt if you pry too deep." He paused, his eyes steady on the horizon. Then he gave her a final, cryptic warning. "Morning decides all things here." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lena to stare at his retreating back, haunted, confused, and more determined than ever to find the truth. The storm rolled in without warning. By midnight, the sky was splitting open with thunder so loud it rattled the window panes. Lena sat upright in bed, heart hammering. The ranch house creaked under the wind, every sound sharp in the darkness. Then she heard it. The clink of a bridle. Someone was saddling a horse in the barn. She crept to the window and saw a lantern swinging in Cole Hart's hand as he led a horse out into the rain. He didn't move like a man checking on livestock. He moved like someone with a purpose, grim, urgent. Her first thought was the children. Lena snatched a coat and slipped outside. The storm drenched her instantly, rain cold and unforgiving on her skin. She kept low, circling behind the barn. That's when she noticed something odd. The storage shed, usually locked with a heavy padlock, hung slightly open. A chill ran down her spine. She pushed the door. Inside, lightning briefly illuminated the cramped space, long enough for her to see chaos. A pile of women's clothing, ripped and stiff with old dirt. A small wooden cross, a woman's name carved in, and then violently scratched out. A coil of rope, frayed but strong. A muddy shovel, still damp with fresh soil. Then her foot hit something small. She knelt and brushed aside a layer of old dirt. A child's toy. A tiny carved horse. Half buried. Why would something like this be in here? A thunderclap shook the shed. Lena stumbled back and ran toward the house, fear squeezing her lungs. Inside, she found Emmett and Lucy awake, sitting on their bed, tears running silently down their cheeks. They didn't speak, they didn't have to. Moments later, the front door creaked open. Cole stepped inside, soaked, a lantern in one hand, and in the other a heavy bundle wrapped tightly in cloth. What had he been burying out there? First light crept over the Texas plains with a cold, gray stillness. Lena had not slept. As soon as the storm eased, she hurried to pack whatever she could find, blankets, water, a bit of jerky. Emmett and Lucy clung to her side, trembling, but determined. "We're leaving now," she whispered. Quietly. Every step toward the front door felt like walking through wet cement. She eased the door open. And froze. Cole Hart stood in the doorway. Calm. Still. Blocking the only exit. His hat dripped rainwater onto the wood floor, but his voice was soft, too soft. "Going somewhere?" Lena instinctively pulled the children behind her. Cole's eyes flicked to them, unreadable. "They're my blood," he said, lowering his head slightly. "And blood stays home." Lucy whimpered. Emmett squeezed Lena's hand so tightly it hurt. Lena forced her voice steady. "They're terrified of you." Cole's jaw tightened. "Because outsiders filled their heads with nonsense. Same thing that poisoned my wife." His gaze sharpened, slicing through Lena like a cold knife. "I won't let it happen again." Footsteps sounded outside. The ranch hands, Eli at the front, gathered in a hesitant semicircle. They didn't step onto the porch, but they didn't leave either. Their faces were tight with conflict, caught between loyalty and fear, courage and obedience. No one spoke. No one breathed. The early sun cast long, tense shadows across the dirt yard. And in that suffocating stillness, Lena realized one brutal truth. Dawn hadn't saved them. It had only brought the moment everything would break. Just as the standoff inside the ranch house threatened to explode, the thundering of hooves broke the silence. A lone rider emerged through the morning haze. Sheriff Calder. He dismounted with purpose, eyes scanning the tense scene, Lena pale and shaking, the children clutching her skirts, Cole rigid with fury, and a ring of frightened ranch hands. Eli stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I sent for him last night." Under the sheriff's stern gaze, Cole's confident mask began to fissure. His breath quickened, shoulders tightening as Calder approached. "Cole," the sheriff said firmly. "We're going for a walk." For a long moment, Cole didn't move. Then, as if the fight drained out of him all at once, he muttered, "Fine. You want the truth? Come see it." They followed him across the ranch and into the line of dark pines bordering the property. Lucy sobbed quietly against Lena's arm as they stepped deeper into the woods. At a small clearing, Cole stopped. 3 mounds of earth, shallow, uneven. Graves. Sheriff Calder's voice hardened. "Explain." Cole's hands shook as he pointed to the first grave. "My wife, she tried to run with the kids. Said she'd rather die than stay. She slipped near the ravine. I tried to stop her." His voice cracked. "She didn't get up." The sheriff motioned to the other 2 mounds. Cole looked away. They weren't supposed to leave either. They promised they'd stay. They lied. A cold realization crawled through Lena's chest. He hadn't offered her kindness. He had chosen her as the next replacement. Sheriff Calder didn't hesitate. The moment Cole finished his bitter confession, the sheriff stepped forward, snapped iron cuffs around his wrists, and pulled him back from the graves. Cole exploded into panic. "No! No, don't take me! They're my children. My blood. They stay with me." His screams echoed through the trees, raw and desperate, as the ranch hands forced him toward the trail. The more he fought, the more feral his voice became, until it broke into a hoarse, sobbing howl. Lucy covered her ears, trembling. Emmett didn't cry. He just stared at the ground, his small face frozen in a numb, hollow shock far too heavy for an 8-year-old. Around them, the ranch hands stood in a miserable semicircle. None met Lena's eyes. Some wept quietly. Others clenched their hats in shaking hands, ashamed of the months, even years, they had looked away. Sheriff Calder rested a hand on Lena's shoulder as Cole's shouts faded down the trail. "What happens to the young'uns now?" he asked gently. Lena looked at the children, Lucy clinging to her waist, Emmett standing rigid, holding back a lifetime of fear. And in that moment, she understood. They had nowhere else to go. Lena sank to her knees in the dirt, her dress torn, hands shaking from everything she had witnessed. Emmett stood stiff as a fence post, but his eyes, hollow and frightened, finally softened when she gently touched his shoulder. Lucy pressed her face into Lena's neck, sobbing so hard her tiny body trembled. Lena's voice cracked as she whispered, "I'm not leaving you. I'll stay until the court decides what happens next. I promise." The words were meant to comfort them, but as soon as they left her mouth, the children clung tighter, as if terrified she might disappear like everyone else in their short, battered lives. Sheriff Calder watched from a few paces away, arms folded, face heavy with emotion. After a long moment, he exhaled and said quietly, almost to himself, "Looks like they chose you. And Lord knows, they chose right." The first blush of dawn crept across the horizon, painting the ranch fields in gold. Birds stirred. The long night was finally ending. Lena wrapped an arm around each child, pulling them close as the rising sun warmed their backs. Sometimes family is not made by blood, but by the ones who stayed when everyone else turned away.